The Emperor of Rome was the most powerful position in the ancient world. The Roman emperors wielded absolute power over their subjects and had more wealth and luxury than anyone else in the empire. They were also responsible for making sure the empire ran smoothly and for protecting Rome from its enemies. The Roman emperors got their power from the Roman Senate. Most of the emperors were related to the first emperor, Augustus, in one way or another. This is because the emperors kept the imperial title in the family. There were a few cases where the Senate appointed a non-relative of Augustus to be emperor, such as when they appointed Publius Helvius, who was not related to Augustus, but these were rare, but he didn't really have anyone to turn to for help or advice. There were always people around the emperor who wanted to take his power for themselves, whether they were members of the imperial family, ambitious generals, or disgruntled senators. The palace was called the Domus Aurea, and it was where all the emperors lived from Nero onwards. He received a salary of 1,000,000 sesterces per year, which was the equivalent of around $40,000 in modern money. The emperor was responsible for the safety and well-being of the entire Roman Empire, and he had to be constantly on guard against enemies, both foreign and domestic. Please like and share this video if you enjoyed it. We will see you next time. Still, it was an honor to be chosen by the Roman Senate to be the Emperor of Rome, and most emperors took the job very seriously. They knew that they were responsible for upholding the glory of Rome, and they worked hard to do just that. So if you ever have the opportunity to become the Emperor of Rome, you should definitely take it. Just be prepared for a lot of hard work and a very lonely life. In addition to his salary, the emperor also received gifts and donations from all over the empire. These gifts could include anything from gold and silver to chariots and slaves. The emperor was also given a villa outside of Rome where he could spend the summers. These villas were usually located in the countryside or on the coast, and they were staffed with servants who took care of everything for the emperor. The palace was enormous, covering nearly 7 acres of land. It contained over 600 rooms, including a library, a gym, a theater, a stadium, and even a private zoo. The emperor's bedroom was probably the most luxurious room in the palace. It was huge and richly decorated with gold and marble. The walls were covered with paintings of mythological scenes, and the bed was made of ivory. The emperor's bathroom was also pretty fancy. It had a bathtub made of pure gold, and servants were always on hand to give the emperor a massage or shave him. The emperor's dining room was probably the most extravagant room in the palace. The table was set with gold and silver dishes, and the walls were decorated with frescoes of Roman feasts. The emperor's meals were prepared by the best cooks in Rome, and he ate his cucumbers chopped so he would uncut himself. The emperor had to be constantly on guard against assassination attempts and coups. This meant that the emperor couldn't really relax and enjoy his power. He was always working, either plotting with his advisors or attending to the business of the empire. Even when he was on vacation, the emperor was never far from the action. He was always accompanied by a retinue of soldiers and officials, and he was always available to be called back to Rome if something went wrong. This is one of the reasons why so many emperors went insane or became tyrants. The constant pressure of living up to the expectations of the Roman people and the Senate was too much for some emperors to handle. The emperor's family was usually the only people he could turn to, but even they couldn't offer him much help. After all, the emperor's family was in the same position as he was, and they were just as busy with the duties of the empire. Most of the time, the imperial title passed down from father to son or from uncle to nephew. This ensured that the Senate always had a say in who was emperor. If the emperor tried to appoint someone outside of the family to be his heir, the Senate would often refuse to accept him. For example, when Emperor Hadrian tried to appoint his adopted son, Antoninus, to be his heir, the Senate refused and instead appointed Hadrian's great Lucius Aelius Caesar to be the next emperor. The Senate was a group of elders who advised the Roman kings and later the emperor. If an emperor became too unpopular or too tyrannical, the Senate would sometimes remove him from power. This usually happened when the emperor was very cruel, or when he tried to take away the power of the Senate. Caligula, Nero, and Domitian were 3 emperors who met this fate. Each of these emperors pushed the limits of the power the Senate would allow them to have, and each of them was eventually killed by the Senate. The king of Rome had been appointed by the Roman Senate, and after the fall of the monarchy, the Senate had appointed the first emperor, Augustus. This meant that the emperor had the power to wage war and make peace. He was also the highest magistrate in Rome, which gave him the power to make laws and appoint officials. The emperor was also the head of the state religion, and was responsible for making sure that the gods of Rome were worshipped properly. Finally, The emperor was the patron of Rome. This meant that he was responsible for the safety and welfare of the city and its inhabitants. He oversaw the distribution of food and wine to the poor, and made sure that the public buildings were maintained. This meant that the emperors owed their power to the Senate and were always careful not to upset them. The Senate was made up of the most important men in Rome, and they controlled the vast majority of the wealth in the city. This gave them a lot of power, and they used it to control the emperor. The emperors had to be careful to always keep the Senate happy. If they didn't, they ran the risk of being assassinated or deposed. Even though the emperors had absolute power over their subjects, they were still answerable to the Roman Senate. Being an emperor was a lot of work, but it was also pretty fun. Emperors got to throw huge parties, build amazing monuments, and have their faces on coins. But being an emperor wasn't all fun and games. There were a lot of perks to the job, but there were also a lot of risks. If the emperor didn't do his job well, he could be assassinated or and even if he did do his job well, he might still end up dead, because the emperor was only as safe as his next chariot ride. So what did it take to be a Roman emperor? Let's find out in this video. Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to look at the life of the Emperor of Rome. But before we get into the video, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an upload. In order to understand what it took to become the Emperor of Rome, we first need to understand how the emperor got his power. The process of becoming the Emperor of Rome was different in each dynasty, but there were some common threads. Most Roman emperors held their position for life, but there were a few cases where an emperor was deposed and even executed by the Senate. The powers of the emperor were vast. He was the supreme commander of the Roman army, which at its peak consisted of around 300,000 men. Being emperor was a very lonely job. The emperor was expected to be a father figure to all Romans.